I'm Lone Candle. The biggest problem with Donald Trump isn't what he gets the most negative press for. It's true that he says a lot of unnecessarily offensive things and has some bigoted policies and comments. These should be a disqualification for any presidential candidate and are huge problems. But maybe it's just my male white bias, but I don't think this is his biggest problem. The biggest problem with Donald Trump has two parts. A, he doesn't have a basic competency on the issues. And B, it's not clear to me that Trump is committed to the democratic rule of law. These two problems can be summed up into one. Donald Trump as president would be incredibly risky. Let me explain each of these parts. Look at the speeches Donald appears to have written himself. Look at the debates. And look at long sit-down interviews. Whether or not you agree with them, other candidates reveal a depth of knowledge on policy. They can talk about it in thoughtful ways. They have a basic competency. Ignoring speeches where he's clearly just reading something written by someone else, Donald's speeches have some good crowd lines mixed with rambling. Often what he's saying isn't even comprehensible. Listen to his speeches and try to explain to yourself what he's trying to say. Half of the time, you can't confidently do it because he's just saying unclear things. While he has legitimate concerns, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Most candidates will have long, hour or more, sit-down interviews with journalists. Here, they have to respond to unexpected questions on particular policies. This gives us an opportunity to see the candidate's thoughts. The other candidates have these that reveal their competency. Donald doesn't. He just says the same stupid lines or defends random scandals, mostly by insulting other people. He seems unable to talk about policy. There was a reason Donald went to as few debates as possible. They made him look bad. They revealed his lack of knowledge. Early on, there were so many candidates, and each one of them had so little speaking time that Trump could get away with a few lines and not look too bad. But in some of them, it was obvious that he differed from the other contenders. While yes, debates are a rhetorical game, and many candidates come with prepared lines, there are times when we can see candidates' policy chumps. It was obvious Trump couldn't even fake it. Yes, his rabid supporters were too biased to notice, but if you go back and watch these debates, focusing on the intelligence of their policy answers, it's obvious Trump doesn't know shit. When we hire someone to do a job, we expect them to know how to accomplish it or have knowledge about that area of work so they can figure it out. So if I need someone to build a bridge, I hire a bridge builder. Someone who knows how to build bridges, like a civil engineer or something. When the country hires a president, we need someone who actually has a decent grasp of policy. Someone who doesn't just understand how one industry works, but how economies as a whole flourish. Someone aware of how presidential and government actions affect our society, and who comprehends the nuances of foreign policy. Donald Trump can't do any of this. And this is a huge risk to the country. Usually a president's policy has only minimal effects on the booms and busts of the business cycle. But someone who's incompetent on policy may implement something so bad that it hurts us all. A trade war with China or Mexico would send the U.S. into recession and harm many families. A huge tax cut that drives up the debt even more could be ruinous for the country. A blustering leader could lead to yet another costly foreign conflict. Someone who doesn't understand policy is more likely to take actions that greatly damage the U.S. as a country. Donald Trump is far too risky to be president. Now, the other candidates are often governors or senators, so they've had more time to learn things. We'd certainly expect them to have more detailed knowledge. But my concern here isn't that Trump doesn't have the detailed knowledge of a senator, but that he doesn't have the knowledge of someone who's even studied policy for a few months. He has no excuse for his dearth of understanding. He should have been preparing long before he declared his presidency. After the announcement, he had months to learn more. He doesn't seem to be doing this. Maybe Trump can just rely on experts. Certainly, any president needs a reliance on experts because there are too many issues for one man to know all the ins and outs of them all. But the president does have the final say. He's the decider. And there is no point to a president if he's just a yes man. In order to internalize and judge the expert advice, a president needs basic competency on the issues. And remember, the president chooses his advisors, so a fool may put people around him who, for whatever reason, agree with his horrible ideas. That is not a great enough barrier to bad policy to make me sleep soundly at night. On to the second risk factor. Trump may not be committed to the democratic rule of law. Now, people on the left and right are always screaming that a president is tyrannical. And these comments are almost always overblown. But in the case with Trump, I think there's a real threat. Since the very beginning of our Constitution, what it actually meant was debated. And our vague, general Constitution allowed a lot of flexibility and changes over time. Whether you think that is good or horrible, that is how U.S. democracy has worked. This and changes in technology and circumstance creates a lot of gray areas for what a president can and cannot do. Other presidents have pushed their powers as far as they could in these gray areas. Then, these actions are challenged in the Supreme Court, and the presidents follow what the court says. This is how this usually works. And these are not tyrannical actions. With Trump, I fear he'd take it to another level. Look at his personality. He seems incredibly petty. He insults people in childish ways and goes after them with horrible falsehoods. He seems overly defensive over the minorest of slights. Look at his problems with his somewhat stubby fingers. His stupid fight with Rosie O'Donnell. How he, without evidence, accused Ted Cruz's father of being involved in the murder of a president. How he never apologizes even when he is clearly wrong. And how he acts like his Trump University venture was not an immoral scam. I think it is reasonable that Trump, in one of his vindictive crusades against someone who has aggrieved him, may use extrajudicial means to attack an opponent. He seems delusional at times, and it's plausible he may not even truly realize he'd be doing this. Of course, if he is aware of his ridiculous lies and claims, yet refuses to correct himself because he doesn't care, then he may knowingly take tyrannical actions because he is more concerned about defending his status than upholding democracy and the rule of law. On top of his scary temperament, he has extreme supporters who seem incapable of judging anything he does without objective reason. He seem incapable of judging anything he does with objective reason. These people may support Donald's actions. At the Republican National Convention, people chanted to have their primary political opponent locked up. Were they just saying it for fun and not literally? Some may say so. But if Donald does imprison Hillary outside of legal means, would these supporters believe what Donald Trump did was illegal? Or would they be swayed by his claim that it wasn't? Or even if they recognize the illegality of the actions, would they be like, yeah, that's bad, but she deserves it? I fear Donald's fans may support a tyrannical Trump. Trump is the greatest threat to turning back our democracy since Nixon. I'm not saying I think he's going to turn the country into a dictatorship, but I'm saying it's a reasonable possibility. A low possibility, but one that is above 1%. And that is far too high when we are talking about changing the very thing that this country stands for. Now, Trump also could be a good thing. It's not worth the gamble, but an unpredictable man may have powerful bargaining leverage. Maybe he really could negotiate new trade deals that benefit Americans because other countries really fear he'd take drastic action. Maybe Congress, afraid of what Trump may do, would agree to needed domestic reforms. This is a possibility high enough to mention, but people, the world isn't so easy. This potential positive outcome is highly unlikely. The world probably won't fall in line to Trump. Their self-dignity and domestic audiences wouldn't allow them to just roll over for a blusterous American president. A cost-benefit analysis of Trump would clearly put the chance of disaster much higher than the chance of unusual benefits. The ghostwriter who wrote Trump's famous book, The Art of the Deal, and spent 18 months interviewing and observing Donald, said this: "I feel a deep sense of remorse that I contributed to presenting Trump in a way that brought him wider attention and made him more appealing than he is. I genuinely believe that if Trump wins and gets the nuclear codes, there is an excellent possibility it will lead to the end of civilization." End quote. Now that's an apparently neutral person who got to know Trump well, telling us how risky a Trump presidency would be. Donald Trump is too risky for the presidency of the United States of America. I hope people understand that a high-risk man like Trump could harm us all through bad policy as well as undemocratic actions, and therefore vote against him, even if we hate the other person we're voting for. I'm Lone Candle. Like me, comment me, love me.